Hello, welcome to my video where I will be explaining how I recreated these beautiful visual effects from Spotify Wrapped 2025. If you have Spotify, you've probably seen these. I have set these up with a lot of math, and I'm not the best 3D artist, but I had a pretty good time setting this up, and I think a lot of the math is pretty interesting. So let me know if you enjoy. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, we are going to go ahead and get started with how I did this. So you're looking at this big spaghetti mess here, and if you've never used Blender, this is probably really confusing. So I will do my best to explain kind of a medium level of like at least having some idea of what's going on in some of the math, but not expecting you to know too much Blender stuff. So you can see that these are all objects in my world, and I can scroll through all these and see all these. And this is our final product. We'll go through these things step by step. You'll see if I go to the beginning. If you look through my camera lens, you can kind of see this is what it starts with. Is this white? But in reality, this is many different items in 3D that we have moving around. So you can see when we have these values here, this is for movement. So like if I pick this white plane here, we can move it around. Ooh, whoa, and we can move it this way, and then we can move it up and down. Whoa. And we've got this camera set up in this special kind of way where it pretty much just goes straight down. It's not like a perspective camera, and we can even see this if we switch to it, and we switch to like perspective, but you can kind of see, now you can actually notice that everything's 3D, but we're not actually going to do that. We're going to keep it ortho, and then it's just going to make everything totally flat from this perspective. And then you can see we have all these elements, just like in Wrapped, that are going to move around the screen. So I also have, as you can see here, this was actually someone's Wrapped, that I went and watched through, and you kind of see how this unfolds. So I took some parts that I liked. I wish I could have done the whole thing. I did not have time for that, but I took some parts I liked and tried to do my own take on it. This was for a drinking event that I did with my friends that I thought I'd do a little bit more of a productional flair here to kind of spice things up. So instead of top artists, top albums, things like that, we have different categories in this competition of how well different people did. So you'll kind of see, just like the regular one, we have this opening up here, and that comes from, if we look at our layers, we have this white layer, and then these checkerboard in the 2025, and then a layer on bottom. So you can see as I flip through these, first of all, we have the logo come here. There's something called keyframing. So you can see that these are green, and then right here it's yellow. So essentially what this is going to do is I'm going to mark these yellow frames. So I'm going to say right here, okay, it should be this scale. You can see, you know, if I scale it, it gets, ooh, wider. Ooh, that's crazy. And if we go to the next one, you can see right here, this is now like the maximum size. And now if I go after, like it won't change. It's stuck at this size. So then in between those two yellow, it'll pretty much just guess what the values should be based on the outside and the inside. So you can set this up in a couple ways. If you remember from math class, we have constant functions, which is just like one straight y value. So what this would look like is it would jump from one scale to the next. We have linear, which I believe is what this is, where it just increases steadily over time. But you can also do other equations. You can do like exponential and quadratic, where it starts, you know, if it started small, it's going to slowly get bigger. Then all of a sudden, boom, it's going to totally be a huge size. So you can play around for different animations, and you can kind of see over the course of the video, I kind of use many of those different strategies, but these are essentially like modeling different mathematical change functions over time. Other interesting thing you'll see is everything is really just lines, not circles. So even though it's supposed to be a circle, you can clearly see that like it's segmented lines here, even though from above it's really hard to see. But if you look close enough, you can kind of tell like right here, it's actually a point right here. It's not actually a circle. And you can change that. You can make it a lot more high res, but I think that this kind of suited my need. So what we have here, actually, I don't even know if I can grab it. No, so I've hidden it, but attached to this plane, I can't even find it here. This is essentially a cone. So I have it set up. There is a special cone. If I go to modifier, let's see if I can find it here. Cone. Yep, so it's not being shown right now, but if I do this, You can see it quickly popped in and then disappeared. This cone. So I have it keyframed so that over time the cone goes up, and anywhere that they touch, I have a modifier on the plane. That is a Boolean. So it's saying with difference, this means anywhere that both of these items are touching, do not display it. So as the cone gets up, it kind of makes this circle, makes it disappear, and it only affects this white plane because only the white plane has this modifier here. Creates a circle effect. We have the logo, and then if you look at this from the top, this is what this looks like. Now for the 2025, this is not actually text. This is actually a bunch of points with curves. So I essentially would go and trace this, right? And you can grab these different points and move them around. So I can just grab this guy, put him, woo, and you can kind of see it tries to make the line based off of the handlers here. So I can tilt it, and it'll kind of tilt some of the line, and we can see what that even looks like if I render it. You can see, wow, it looks all funky now. And so just kind of manually going through each of these, and then some of them you can see here, you can change the style. So right now, you can do automatic free will match the 2 points to the left and right and try to guess what it would be in the middle. You can do, or I guess that's automatic. Doesn't really matter. Point is you can have these segments of the curve act differently. So like this one controls this segment here, but this one is strictly like it can pivot a lot more. And so I can just point these two at each other and have it be a lot more linear. And it's like a straight point in the line. So you can kind of match all these different points in the line to make this 2025, and then you just change the color. And then for movement, obviously it's really simple. It just moves at a constant linear rate across the screen. What was way harder are these tiles in the background. So you can see, we will hide the cone. We don't need the cone right now. If I go and check one of these guys out, there's a lot going on them visually. So it's not like 2025 where we just get a flat red color. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out this menu, and we can see what's going on here. So this is our math represented by these nodes, and it goes from left to right. So essentially this is where our ultimate data goes into, and it goes boo, 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 and then it pumps out. This is what the actual material is. And the only thing that we really need to change is the color. But if you wanted, we could make it metallic, which doesn't actually make it look like it's really doing a whole lot right now, but we can change all these other values. Alpha is another interesting one. If we turn it down, it becomes more transparent. Here, it just turns to black. And all kinds of things. Like you can have an emission so that it glows, and then, if I turn that up, all it does is glow. But if we go back to the beginning, what we are doing is we're taking the object's location. We are separating out the X and Y value, and then we're essentially using it to try to make these different shapes that we see visually. So if we watch from the top, what is actually happening in these guys? If we watch frame by frame, there's a couple things going on. So one of which is these rings. So there are these rings that are kind of emanating outward, and then these vertical lines here that will cause the line to like inverse and be the other color. So you can see if I kind of mark my line here, it's growing, growing, growing. I'm still tracing it. And then now it's kind of a new part of it has been birthed from the middle. So now this is part of the same ring, but some of it's black and some of it's white. And these rings kind of just keep going outward. And they're also, so it's divided up with these lines and rings, and we have to have movement for both of them. So you can see I have the keyframes for these. So this one is for where the lines are. So it moves where the lines are located. And then this one is for how much like the rings are kind of moving up and down here. It's a really trippy visual effect. I actually thought this part was one of my favorite parts of the wraps. So we can see here, we can change like some of the location of where the ring is. So I moved it to kind of this corner. So you get this kind of effect where, because it's actually mirrored. This isn't just the center of the ring. You can actually see this is like wider than what the circumference of the circle should be. And essentially what we're doing is, this is like the crazy part, and I will just essentially simplify. Black is 0 and white is 1, and we need to find everywhere that we need to put white and put it there and just kind of leave the rest black. And I think you can see this if I actually just attach this value here. Yeah, so you can see this is some of the whiteness. So like there is multiple stacks of where we should add white, and then everything else is just automatically black. So you can see this was one section of like this phase of ring, and then if I do this one, I think it's probably the other phase, right? Yeah, so one of the two phases comes from the top and the other one comes from the bottom, and then we paste them both in at the same time. Let's see if I grab this one, what we're gonna see. So this one is just the rings going outward, and then when we multiply, again, because things are either 1 or 0, right? So if something is black in one of our inputs, like from this add, and it's black in the other, 0 times 0 is 0. If it's black in one input and it's 1 in the other, so black in one, white in the other, 0 and 1, that's also 0. So what we can essentially do is when we multiply these together, we're only keeping the area that's white in both of them, which is how we actually do that filtering. And then similar to the objects moving, we keyframe the phase of like the waves. So you can see this is like the circle shapes, and you can even change like the distortion, makes it all like, whoa, you know. Interesting things to play around with. And then the where the vertical lines are. And then the lines have this interesting thing called a floored modulo. Modulo is the remainder you get when you divide something. So like right here, I have mod 5. So if I said 3 mod 5, it's like, well, 3 doesn't go into 5 evenly, so the remainder is 3. But if I said 7 mod 5, 5 goes into 7 once, and then the remainder is 2. 2 is left over. So what you're essentially going to get is as your x increases, so I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, what I'm actually going to get is 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can kind of see it's increasing over and over again, and that's exactly what we want here. Is it's like increasing steadily and then starts over. So even though it looks like if I follow this line, it looks like the line is actually moving outward, what it's actually doing is it's moving a certain distance and then just restarting back from the middle. But visually, it ends up being this much more fluid effect, right? Where you can imagine if I have 3 things lined up and they move pretty much to the position of where the previous one was and then teleport back to where they were, it makes it actually look like it's moving. So that's kind of our first layer for the opening, and you can see that if I just let this play, all this stuff. Last part is this line. So the line is interesting. I know you can't really see it here, but you know what? This is how they did it in Wrapped, and I copied Wrapped. I would not do this decision they made with these lines, but that is for them to decide. For here, we have these factors start and end. So essentially, this is very similar to 2025, except for it's way simpler. You can just grab all these points in the line. You can kind of shift them around however you want. So like if I pull this out, it has more influence. If I push it in, it has less influence. And then you can turn them. So this is really easy. You know, you just blop, 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 blop a bunch of points down. And then we have these start and ends. So as I turn this value up and down, it starts the line, and then I can end it. So I can pull the back out from kind of behind the line as well. And that's exactly the effect we wanted to copy. So you can see it's kind of hard to see, but it starts drawing the line. And then as it finishes the line, you can kind of see here, now it's just the end. And then we keyframe all 4 of these panels to move away at the same time. And then we just move these new panels in. So now that I've made one of these panels with the specific pattern I want, I can just copy and paste and move them however I like. Makes it really easy. For the fonts, you'll notice I went and picked special font. This isn't actually what Spotify uses because I think they have their own copyrighted typeface, but I went and found these like very similar ones. And these are just text elements. So like it's really easy for me to just grab them, hit tab, and like make it say whatever I want, which is nice if I have typos, which I have often, or if I want to reuse it for something else, which I probably want for this one. And if we keep it pushing, we're going to go ahead and see in the wrapped videos here, you'll see the panes kind of move, so it slides as you slide your finger. Obviously, no one's like touching this screen, I guess, but we have that same slide effect, and the way we do that is by literally sliding in this gray plane over the other one. So you can kind of see it moves over the other one. And then we get this very interesting looking pane. So we got text again. That's nothing crazy. The other thing you'll notice is these like faint black lines, these kind of strings. Like here you can really see them. So what this is saying is there's like a master parent element, and as we move this, everything that's attached to it moves with it as well, which makes the animation a lot easier. And then we have these concentric rings. And this effect was really hard because if you notice in the video, there's actually a ton going on. So there are concentric rings. They all have to be the same width. They all have to be somewhat equally spaced. And then one of them is going to alternate and be purple going from the inside to the outside. Like that's a pretty weird effect, all things considered. And then it takes like a part of it. So rather than show the whole ring, it actually cuts some of it off. So you can see if I render this, you only get that square effect. And the reason I do that, so normally you could use a Boolean similar to what I did the first time, but instead of subtracting the area they both touch, you can only keep the area they both touch. So what I originally had was like a rectangle that would overlap, and then whatever area they're overlapping in would only keep that area. Computationally, huge pain in the butt, really hard for my computer to render. So instead I did a real cheapo thing where because the colors are flat, I can just make more panes and just parent them to this so that it looks from above, like it looks like it's cut off, but like it's not actually cut off at all. Like now, obviously that looks really silly. But it gets the job done. So I was on a bit of a time crunch, so you got to think about your priorities, and this is what I prioritized. So if you see the math with our rings here, this one was a bit of a beast. So we got a lot of things going on with the rings. We are using the scene time and the index to move the rings. So you can imagine as time goes on, right, the rings kind of jiggle a bit. They kind of go back and forth. You can see if I watch this one here, it goes out and then in and then out and then in and out. So we are using the time, and then we are also using the index, meaning like which ring are we talking about, and each one is going to be offset a little bit. So the index is going to go like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this just gives us a nice number for each ring so that they're each like offset by an even amount. And then I don't even know what this does. Let's see if I change this a bunch what it does. Oh, so this is the speed, so we can make it really slow, or I guess if we crank this down. Whoa! Like I remember when I was setting this up the first time, if you just have it on 1, which obviously is like if you didn't divide it, holy cow, they're jumping all over the place. So here you can like fine tune all these. You can also create custom values that plug into this that you can then attach to the object in custom properties, so that like if I give this object to someone else, they can just tweak the custom properties, and I have it plugged into the math correctly where it'll just give them the change they want. Here we're going to use a sine function. So what does the sine function do? It goes up and down over time. That's exactly what we want, is like that side to side motion. So as the index won't change because each ring has its own index, but the time will change. Plug that into a sine function, and we're now getting something that's waving up and down. So let's, I don't even know, this one does something else. We're not going to bother with every single one of them. That plays with the scale of each ring, and each one of these is going to be that kind of curved circle. Mesh line, so this is interesting. So each of these circles is actually on a point on a line, but I also have the line, all points of the line are in the same spot. So it's not really a line, it's really 17 points, and then each one of them gets a circle. But you can see, first of all, I can just move the whole thing here, but also this is the offset. So it's saying for all 17 of these points, how much should I offset each one from the last? And I have that as 0 right now, but you can see if I increase it, like each ring will be further and further in that direction from the other ones. And you can see I can also do this upwards. It's pretty cool. You get like this tornado looking thing. But that's not what we're going for here. In fact, actually, if I do it like this, it visually looks the same from the top, but it looks really silly from the side, and you can see it kind of can jut out above the border parts. So that is to get some of this set up, this part is for the ID, which is for the purple part. So essentially, we're also using scene time and index, and we're also using our friend the florid modulo, and we are essentially going from one index to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, to the outest one, and then we restart. So with modulo 17, it goes from index 0 to 1, 3, 4, 5, all the way until it goes from 16. It tries to go to 17, but 17 divided by 17 has a remainder of 0, so it goes back to 0. And then when it goes to 18, 18 divided by 17 has a remainder of 1, so it goes to 1. 19 divided by 17, remainder of 2, so on and so forth. So that gives us the pattern we want of kind of going linearly, but then restarting every once in a while. And what's the once in a while? Right here it's 17, but you can change that value. If I go in and change this and make this like 2, now it's every 2, actually, that it repeats. And you can see it just alternates, or I could make this every 4, but we only want one of them. So we're going to make it every 17 lines, and that because we have 17 lines and we have one every 17 lines, we only have one purple one. So we're copying that too. Perfect. This is a transform. I'm looking at this now. This could be gone. We are literally not changing it at all. We are multiplying the scale by 1. We are adding 0 to the rotation. We are adding 0 to the translation. Whoopsies. And then this part was for adding a little bit of actual geometry, like adding a little space to the circles so that it's not... Originally, when you have like a curve or something, it's doesn't have any width. So when you render it, you don't see anything. So if I take this away, you can... Here we go. So this makes it bigger and smaller. And then that, we want to keep it flat. But you'll see if I go from the side, if I increase this, you actually see what these rings look like. And it's really trippy. They're like kind of weird cylinder looking things. But we don't want that. We want it to just look flat. So we just make that a very small value. And then you can see here we're setting some of the circles. This was what I used to try to cut it out so that, you know, we can see we have a Boolean here, but this is unused anymore. So all of that makes this nice circle shape. It's really hard to get it so like each ring is the same size because you can't just like scale them blindly. You have to scale the radius, not like the whole thing. And some of that math, again, using modulo and sine, took some time to think of like, how do I take a physical motion I'm seeing and then turn that into math and then create the math and plug that into the proper places where I get it. Another line, we already went over how the line works. It's placed pretty randomly. And then you can see here, same thing, right? Now it's the beer we drank instead of the minutes that we listen to music. Haha. And then we can just copy and paste that same ring that we used before. Moving to the next part. So this was originally the part where it goes over your taste. And you can see like these little dots flip over. So you'll notice with the dots, they look 2-dimensional, but are actually like 3-dimensional. It's these little cylinders, and one of the faces is red. And they actually move in this weird way where they all flip over, but then they all pause for a set amount of time, and then they start to flip over the other way. So it's not like a continual turn. You need the turn to pause halfway through. That part was quite difficult. So I'm going to let this play through. And essentially what we have is we start with one cylinder. And then if I go right here, I guess I used to do this and now I don't. So this guy also has a bunch of math associated with him. So I believe somewhere, yeah, mesh line again, right? So you can see if I crank this, it goes further, or I can get less. And then these are distributed on a line where we actually do want to space them out. So you can see I can space them out however I want there. I can move it this way. We could have them go vertical if I wanted, which you wouldn't be able to see here. And then this is the math for flipping them. So we take, part of it is their X position. So it's like we're not indexing each of them one at a time where we're going, okay, this guy, now this guy, now this guy, now this guy, now this guy. We actually want it to be like a wave. So it's like as the X position, which is what we do here, we take the 3-dimensional position, we just get the X out. As that position kind of crosses a certain threshold, they start to flip. And that flipping is obviously really easy. It's just, you know, you rotate the... I am rotating the wrong way. Oop. I'm rotating something the wrong way. Maybe it's a different part. Oh, here we go. So here you can do, woo, flip them around a whole bunch. How fun. So we have this interesting kind of step function. So these maximum nodes, oh, I clamped that one, are kind of important. So what their job is essentially it will take whatever's larger, either 1/10 or whatever's being plugged into it. And so we've kind of set the rotation to this 1/10, and we're plugging in this other value that's less than 1/10, and we're waiting for it to cross that threshold. So you can see in the beginning, like it's 1/10, it's 1/10, it's 1/10, and then as the value gets greater than 1/10, now it actually starts to take an effect. Because once it goes to like 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, the 0.2, 0.3, 0.4 is actually being passed on. Versus if this was 0, it's still passing the 0.1 because 0.1 is greater than 0 last time I checked. So then we're just going to add that rotation in for each one of these. And again, we're taking one cylinder, we're extrapolating it out to be a line, and then you can literally just copy and paste and have multiple lines. So you can see these are flipping. And I'm now realizing I did actually mess this up. These inside ones actually need to be a little bit more offset because they're not going 3 at a time. They are going, yeah, so they're going in like vertical lines. So you can see I did actually need to change the flipping so that, you know, you're, instead of going in these triplets, yeah, so now you can see they actually would be offset. So they start to flip, start to flip, start to flip, and you can see they stop for a certain amount of time before they flip over. How do we do that? Essentially with these other step functions, or with like the minimum maximum, is we're pretty much going to let it increase from a value we'll call x, which here was 0.1, until it hits a value right here, which is the 3.175. This will allow a very specific increase of like, you will start from 0 with your counting or whatever it is that's over here, but really that's going to display as 0.1 until the value from the left passes 0.1. So as 0 becomes, you know, 0.002, we're still showing 0.1, but once it becomes 0.2, then we're showing it 0.3, 0.4, whatever, and then we get to 3, and 3 is less than this 3.175, so we're still showing the 0.175, and then eventually that 3, or like our value is going to surpass this, and it will change again. I know that does not make a whole lot of sense, but essentially this is one rotation, and the bottom logic here is the second rotation. So it is going to add to the rotation until it gets this way, and then once it's facing this direction, nothing's going to happen because it's hit like the peak of that part of our math, and then when it's turning over, that means, okay, now it's satisfied this other condition where it's in between the maximum and minimum, and it will be allowed to flip until, bam, it hits it again. So that it just gives us like one flip with 2 segments, which is what we're looking for. And, you know, haha, little phrase, and we're talking about the girls here and how well they did. So I put some default names in here, except for one of them. Dua did come, so I appreciate that. She's really kind of always down for a good time, and I think that that's important when you're looking for a participant of a large-scale drinking game. But here, these texts actually are, if we go look, and you can also see the cylinders are very funnily also 3-dimensional as well, and you can see a ton of stuff is parented to this sheet. So as it moves, all these guys move with it, which is kind of adorable. We don't need this math anymore, so we can go ahead and close that back up. But the name is actually a text element with a small rectangle behind it. And it is trying to kind of see how long the text is and guess a rectangle size. It's actually not very accurate. Like sometimes you'll get wider borders on certain sizes and not others. But honestly, that's very close to the style that the Wrapped already was in. So I'm like, honestly, we are just going to leave that be. You'll also notice they actually used black. I used this dark gray. It looked visually inconsistent based on the screen you were looking at. I just stuck with the gray. I like the style of it. But you can see if I change this, it also changes the border of the text, which is nice. Like if you put a tall letter, it will get taller, and if you put a low letter, it'll come out the bottom. So you can see sometimes you'll get some overlap. You have all these names, and then I have these. You can replace them programmatically with a script, which I do later, which is pretty helpful. So far, this is all we've shown. We've had these little pop-ups. We did the Go Piss Girl. And now we're reusing this guy. The line also not crazy. You just have to make it look beer can shaped, have it play through. And then you can see here, we are just moving the whole pane over time. And now we have our last pane, which is this other gray one. So if I look down again, oh, now we're talking about the guys. Great. So you can see again, like I can just move this text around. I can rotate it. I can do whatever I want to it. We have two different texts. I have my kind of sample ones here for the two different fonts. This is supposed to be a star. It's supposed to look like this. Right, I did a poor job, and I was just like, this is good enough, right? People understand it's supposed to be a star. And then here, I filled this in with default stuff again, except for me. I'm here, but you can see these are just pictures of people, and you can change these again with text, and each one has an image, and this looks very similar to this part right here. So could have put a little bit more elbow grease in with like putting in some other lines and stuff, but I was on an extreme time crunch, which is why I didn't do that. And then our last part, which if we go and watch our wrapped, is I skipped the album part, but and the whole, you know what, we'll just show it. If you watch your wrap, you know what I'm talking about, but it is this part where it shows each of the teams, and so these would be pictures of our 5 teams that fly by. How did I do this? Well, one, we've already seen these rings, except for I turned the shader off. I just made it white rather than have that like kind of purple logic. And then we have these cylinders here. So you can see it kind of passes very funnily through here. And then you can see what the heck's going on with this, right? So what it actually, each of these is it is a image as plane, which is just like what this is or any of these. The images are squares, and then we do a Boolean with a torus. And a torus, if you don't know mathematically, is a donut. So you can see this is like, it's invisible, but this is a 3-dimensional invisible donut. And we're saying, okay, if it's touching the donut, cut it out. And that's how we get this nice circular shape. You can see it's like not a perfect circle. And then we can just keyframe, pulling them in one at a time and showing them all off. And then we have these guys waiting in the wings. So these guys have been here the whole time, part of the panel. Very interesting to actually get the race going. A lot of movement on these. So if we break one of these down, first we have an image. Then we have an invisible donut making it a circle. Then we're going to pull our little pane again. We have geometry once more. And what we are doing is saying, you know, we're going to put these rings down. And the ring actually is a circle with another gray circle on it. You can see if I look at it from this side, they're not hollow. They just have gray in them, which honestly is kind of funny. And each one is like a little bit lower than the next. It's like very subtle there, but it's enough that they kind of stack in this way. It looks like the bubbles are coming out of it. So what I was talking about earlier with the modulo is you'll actually see this motion here, that when I let this play, each of these rings is shifting. And then what happens is the one at the end, it looks like it pops back to the beginning, but what's really happening is this guy is jumping back here. So he's each one of these, they'll do like a big jump every, whatever the modulo is, like every 5 frames it does a bigger jump. So it creates like this animation where it looks like the bubbles are coming out. But what it's actually doing is the bubbles are coming, and then they jump forward, and then they're coming, jump forward. But it looks like they're emanating out. So one of them's just fixed and stuck on whatever the thing is. The other ones trickle out. And like, again, if you remember the offset from earlier, now we actually do have an offset. So each one's a little bit lower. You can see if I make them higher, oh, that's really low. But if I make them higher, then it's the other way that the circle's kind of coming out. And you can offset them. So I can make it really, you know, each one having their own circle. I can go horizontally as well. And then these are also keyframed automatically so that you can see they all start here. And then as time goes on, these little text elements will pop up from the bottom. So they're just keyframed to come up, be in that position, and then go down. You can even see if I grab this, these dots are all of the positions. So it represents like a change. So it starts here, there's movement until it hits the second diamond. Then this one and this one are identical. so it doesn't have to move at all. And then one more slight movement, and then this last one's actually for visibilities. So each of these ones pop up. As they pop up, the script that I wrote keyframes each of these guys. You can see there's many keyframes to be essentially how their location is a representation of their cumulative score. So you'll notice they'll all start in the same position, and then for shotgun, these are how well all the teams did during the shotgun. So I did really well. The white team did not as well, and then these guys got 3rd, 4th, and 5th place. So whatever team is closest to the top is always the one in last. The one at the bottom is the one in first, and then the middle 3 are actually going to be proportional. So they will be normalized, if you know what that means, based on the other 2 positions. So for example, if the worst team had 0 and the best team had 10, then essentially imagine an invisible line here that's 10 and 0. Whatever their score is, they will be in between those two. So if this is 2, he'll kind of be near the top. If this is 9, he'll be right next to the 10. But if maybe all of these are 3, then they'll all kind of hang out in this middle area far away from the guy on top who's 10. And as this changes, so maybe the back is 50 and the top is 70. So like the 60s would be in the middle of that, and if you had 55, you'd be closer to the end. So this is like reflecting the cumulative scores in real time as they happen. So you can see shotgun, like this is pretty much how shotgun went, and then extreme trout, I didn't do as well. So my cumulative score is technically still increasing, but I don't have the most anymore. This bass just passed me. We got the crawdad and Taylor Swift and everyone. We're all having a good time. So then baseball happens. Taylor Swift's pretty good at baseball, so she's going to pop ahead there. Boat race, all these other events, you can see they kind of move. So these are neck and neck, and I can tell you the top team got, like whatever number 100, and then this second place team was behind by like a teeny amount of points. So that's the reason these look neck and neck, is because it was neck and neck, and then the margin between the second and the third place team was way bigger. We also have these dashes. I did a terrible job of these dashes, but essentially, if we zoom in, they're not even circular. They're actually just, I just added 1 extra point. Or I guess they added a couple extra points. And then we just have very simple, we just have very simple array modifiers. So what an array modifier does is it just copies. You can see this is very lazily done. I literally just have 5, and they all just have like a certain offset. So the pattern is very repetitive. Again, time crunch. Would have done these things differently with more time, but that kind of adds these dashes that makes it look like these guys have some speed. So when that's all done, this time there was a lot going on visually, so I actually moved the camera. You can see that the camera itself moves, and then we have this same visual here. We're reusing everything from earlier at this point, and then this is going to be like the end of our video. Last part here, you can see if I go to scripting, we have this master script. And I've got some dummy data here, but essentially I have another program that does all the scoring, and then it gives me this information. And we have functions to automatically change the geometry and the images it's using based on what's here. So like my boy list is going to be the best, second, third, fourth, fifth boy, and then same thing with the girl list. And then we have these team lists, and then this is their score cumulatively. So I fill this in with dummy information, but because it can't go down because you're adding points. I just filled that in. But essentially, each index in the list is like a running total of how many points they got, and then the last one is the score that they actually ended up with. So I think this probably will break if I press play, but let's try it anyway, and let's see if these changes were reflected. So there should be some changes to the names, that they should now be me, LeBron 345, and then these other ones. And if I go to layout, let's see. So first of all, yeah, you can see all this data is changed. It's now re-keyframed all of these nodes to respect these new scores, and with some of the like nonsense numbers, these just like jump around all over the place, which is pretty funny. You can also see it's now changed all the names. Me, LeBron 345. I also had it set up so that depending on whose name I put in, it would automatically replace their picture as well. And then you can see for the girls, this is now reflective of that list that we had. So I was able to get all this pre-recorded or pre-set up so that I could just dump this info in the script, hit play, and then render it, and it would come out to what I was looking for. So a lot of moving parts here, a lot of things that I learned. Hopefully you find this helpful. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, you can go ahead and watch this beautiful animation with some of my commentary. And here is our final product. Nice little opening. I started us off with some Pink Pantheress, her hit from this year, Illegal. I tried to keep all of the music 2025 to kind of have it in theme with Wrapped. For this part, I believe I had an Addison Rae track. She had an album this year, self-titled, very bold, that I thought was kind of interesting. This was a song for this. I did What Was That for Lord. You can see these little flipper things I think look beautiful. With the different aspect ratio, obviously this is wider, you got to do a lot more of them, but this was my favorite part. I really like how these look. And then these are the names. Name one would be our top girl, so that would be our MVP, and then the other ones are there just to get a little bit of credit there. Instead of the hourglass, we of course have the beer can, and then we're going to go ahead and announce the guys. I think I had some Calvin Harris this year. He had a nice song. So Snake in this example would be our MVP, but it also shows our other guys who performed this year. But this is what everyone really cares about, is which pair ended up taking home the gold. So each of these circles is going to represent a different team, and we're going to go ahead and see them race. So then this, of course, we're representing their progress in real time. We're playing the Lizewo remix of Messy, which is an extremely popular song that came out this year, and the remix is also quite popular. While this was going on, kind of building up some tension, people are watching the bubbles. They have no idea who's going to win and who's going to lose. They've been playing the events, but they're like, I don't know who's going to win. And by a hair, the Crawdad team ends up sticking it out, and then we end up showing that off. And that is going to conclude our Wrapped video. So hope you enjoyed that. I had a great time making this, and I learned a lot. And hopefully this inspires you to do your own spin on Wrapped next year.